All right, we're back. It's another Carolina podcast. South Carolina falling to 4-6 after losing 20-15 to Appalachian State. They were a 6.5-point favorite is where the line closed. It's the third time this year that South Carolina has lost as a favorite. It's the first time now that a Sun Belt team has beaten two Power 5 teams in a season. So I guess congratulations to App State, who played a good game, came in with the right game plan. And I anticipated that today would have been probably kind of a testy podcast because I'm an antagonist and I like to push y'all's buttons, but I'm very sleepy and I think Chris is very sleepy. So we might actually keep our emotions in check. I won't promise anything though, because guys, Carolina is just straight up bad. And this is, I guess, week number 6 of more questions than answers. I'll say week number 5 of more questions than answers because the Alabama loss was actually a pretty decent performance. But we'll say week number 5 of more questions than answers. So, leaving the App State game, what is your biggest question about the South Carolina team, Wes?
My biggest question, can this offense be fixed? And I say it as a question because, and it's probably not even a question at this point, I think we've really reached the point where it's hard to say that it can be fixed, certainly this year. The inability to run the football against App State, to me, was probably, in a season where I think we've kind of learned you shouldn't be shocked by anything you see, whether it's, just inexplicably looking awful or beating Georgia in Athens. To me, that actually may have been the most surprising. That may have been more surprising for me than that South Carolina beat Georgia in Athens, was that South Carolina could not run the football at all against App State.
I think that's probably right.
Like, at all. You look at the numbers. It was brutal, dude. And this team has run the football, for the most part, well this year, other than a couple of other instances. And against pretty good defensive fronts at times. Like, we're not just talking, sometimes it's skewed because a team will, hammer the lesser run defenses they play, just for example, from a matchup standpoint. And then, I think that was a problem for South Carolina last year. They actually ran the ball pretty well against the teams that sort of struggled in that area. And those were the games that they were pretty good offensively. But then when they faced, your Georgias of the world, they could not run the football. This year, they've run the football against some good people and then just weren't able to get a push at all against App State. To me, that was incredibly surprising. The fact that the offense just, for about, you'd say, 2 quarters worth, from the middle portion of the game, just couldn't really get anything going at all.
Who did they not run the ball well against? I mean, you're exactly right, but I would go even one step further and say South Carolina has run the ball well against everybody.
Missouri.
But they didn't even run the ball against Missouri, which is why I would push back on
Didn't try as much, yeah.
Yeah, they didn't try. What did Carolina's running backs had, I think, 3 carries after the first quarter, 6 at halftime, and finished the game with a combined 14. Like, I don't count that as not being able to successfully run the ball. When, I'm looking at the stats right now. Rico Dowdle had 8 carries for the whole game. Tavian Feaster had 6 carries for the whole game. That doesn't count as not being able to run the ball well. They just didn't run it. And some people have pointed to Tennessee. Tavian Feaster still 19 carries for 80 yards, like a little over 4 yards per carry. That's below his season average, but it wasn't a disaster. What happened on Saturday I thought was completely unforeseeable, completely inexplicable, and completely inexcusable. There's no reason against a front like Appalachian State, in terms of just the sheer size. And Carolina has been touting its athleticism, so even if you say those guys were a little smaller, so they were a little bit faster, the reason Jordan Rhodes and Javon Gwinnett are in there are because Hank Manis and Eric Douglas didn't work out, but also they offer you a lot more athleticism. That's why Carolina has been able to rely a little bit more on the pin and pull as their go-to run play. There's I will never understand. I said this on my local show. I could watch that game 50 more times, and I'll never understand why Carolina couldn't run the football. They just didn't have it.
I mean, 247 against Kentucky, okay, which is not a great team, but pretty solid defense. Georgia is still not giving up a rushing touchdown this year. 142 yards against Georgia. Interestingly, Kentucky actually had more yards against Georgia running the football than South Carolina did, but I think it was the second highest performance of the season in terms of running the ball. Was it a wonderful one for South Carolina? No, they averaged 3.9 a carry, but they had 142 yards. which is way more than they've been having in that series. I think what was the stat I think it was South Carolina's highest was like 54 in the past 3 years or something like that. I mean, it was some insane
against Georgia.
Yeah.
Some insane stat. So 142. I mean, 217 against Florida. Tavian Feaster had 175 yards against Florida
on 25 carries, I think, if I remember correctly.
Now, Rico Dowdle wasn't himself the other night.
Sure.
Yeah, and I do.
But you shouldn't need Rico Dowdle to be 100%
right.
himself.
I think that certainly was a factor, and I think I tried to go through and how or why did this happen? I do think there were times where their guys' lack of size, sort of, especially on the pin and pull, when you have a big guy like Jordan Rhodes out there on the edge, and their guy just sort of, it was almost like at times they went underneath the blocks and just sort of muddied everything up, and then that allowed other players to get there and sort of rally to the football. But still, it's why South Carolina, the guys you are blocking, why they weren't able to get a push, why they weren't able to me, complete blocks. It seemed like they were able to start blocks, but they weren't able to necessarily finish blocks. Like App State was able to get off of blocks at a rate I didn't really expect at all. So, we're going down the rabbit hole as we normally do. But you asked me the biggest question. I think the biggest question is, can this offense be fixed, or are you looking at another situation of, possible changes on that side of the ball? That's my biggest question right now.
Chris, what's your biggest question leaving the Appalachian State game?
I think it's the long term of the program, is now called into question more. Are you talking about more with this team or just in general?
It doesn't matter. Whatever your burning question is after this game, and that would be legitimate, because I said in the immediate aftermath of the game, I thought this was a program-damaging win. So you don't think I'm overstating that? Or sorry, a program-damaging loss.
No, I don't think so, because, I mean, now it calls everything into question. I mean, the season has not gone as expected, obviously. This makes it extremely difficult to get to a bowl game. You're staring at a possible 4-8. You're staring at missing a bowl game for the first time in the Muschamp era. You're looking at a second straight losing season, and so all those things are tough to swallow for Gamecock fans. And I think it's all compounded by the fact that, the first 2 years went better than expected, right? I mean,
right.
You don't beat Georgia, you don't beat Clemson. Some of that has to do with where the programs were relative to each other. But they certainly showed improvement. I mean, I did not have them winning 6 games year one, did not having them winning 9 year two. It looked on the up and up. Last year was an obvious step back. There are a lot of reasons for that. We don't need to relitigate them. But when you have the bowl last year, right, combined with another laid egg in Charlotte to begin this year with a first-year coach at a UNC program that was horrible last year, led by an old coach, right? Okay.
Oh, I see. Okay. I thought you were talking about Mac Brown. I was like, we can't call him a first-year head coach.
Yeah, well, yeah, first year at North Carolina.
Yeah.
Taking over a poor program.
Right.
And then the Missouri game, and then the Tennessee game, and just all these different things that have happened, and then losing at home to App State. I mean, it's really it's all built on each other. All these different things have built on one another. And now the fan sort of vitriol and the way that the fans are feeling, the fan base, and a lot of it's justified, are very frustrated with this program. And there's a lot of reports coming out. I mean, everybody can see that some things are going to be changing in the offseason. So, yeah, I mean, that was my biggest takeaway, because if they beat App State, you maybe at least people don't feel great about it. You might not go in feeling great about it, but you at least sort of prolong maybe those questions. Maybe they're shelved until you see what happened against A&M and Clemson. I think it just really diminishes the confidence right now, and I think some things are going to have to take place to restore that. It's
a next level kind of bad that moves this season from, wow, that was a bad season, to, oh my gosh. The Appalachian State game, they're obviously so much better than Citadel. It's not even really worth making the comparison, but when people think about the 2019 Carolina football season, they're going to think about the App State loss in the same way they think about the 2015 Citadel loss. And I think now it really tips the scales where you say, would you trade the North Carolina and, let's say, Tennessee losses, 2 games where you were favored and lost, for the Georgia game? And a lot of fans would say, no, it's still important to have the Georgia game. Now, I mean, unequivocally, with the 3 losses as favorites, it tips the scales. And it basically, I mean, we are so far beyond the point of having used up all the goodwill generated for Will Muschamp and for this program by that Georgia win. It's just so far gone at this point that it doesn't even feel like the same season.
Yeah, and I think for me, going back to the offense, I go back, like Chris was talking about, to last year as well. And, I just wonder what happened because, I think early on last year there were some offensive struggles at times for sure. But then I think you look for a stretch. They had to come from behind to beat Tennessee, but that, 27-24 at home last year. But that was actually for what they were trying to do, that was a pretty efficient offensive performance. It was sort of more of a run-based game plan. But they go to Ole Miss, they win in a shootout there. They obviously everybody remembers what happened at Florida. They blow the lead, but you actually put up some points. You had some really explosive moments in that game. That's not even though they lost the game, that's not a game where you're saying, man, this offense was awful. Chattanooga, you do what you're supposed to do, blow them out. And then Clemson, a defense that is, especially last year, one of, if not the best in the country. Statistically, nobody else really had much success against Clemson's defense.
Loaded with NFL talent.
Yeah, and you come up with this outstanding game plan. And actually some really unique stuff that South Carolina did in that game, if you really go down to the details of what they were able to do, that nobody else did, and it worked. You had this amazing game plan in a loss where you're able to give your team a chance, even with a defense that was working with the 11th string out there at certain positions. But
the 11th string.
Then Akron, I think you scored 28 points in the first half, and then nothing in the second half.
It was like 28-15 final or something.
28-3.
Yeah, they didn't.
Oh, it was just 28-3.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So the game's never really in danger, and it was nasty weather. Nobody wanted to be there in the second half. It seemed you're just like, well, maybe they're just trying to get to the finish line. They're just trying to get to the end of this game. But then it sort of carries over. You score nothing against Virginia in a game that, to me, looking back, felt sort of like how the offense looked against Kentucky last year. Lots of zone from Virginia and Kentucky, and just no answers for South Carolina offensively. North Carolina, is a struggle. Obviously, we know what happened to Charleston Southern. Alabama, you hung in there, but then Missouri's a struggle. And now you're sort of, as the year goes on, it seems like the offense hasn't gotten better, but has sort of gotten worse, and you just still have these stretches. I think the big thing is everybody wants things to be more consistent. If you look, I was talking about this the other day. If you look at Oklahoma's message board after they lose to Kansas State, they're making the same, arguments about inexplicably losing this game that South Carolina people are making about their current season.
But the difference is...
But I think if you look at the year in totality now, as we're 10 games in, and you look at the fact that South Carolina offensively just has had way more downs than ups, and these stretches, I'm just saying that to say everybody wants things to be a little bit better. Everybody wants consistency. Mm-hmm. In college football, you're never going to have complete consistency. Even the greatest offenses are going to have bad days. Even the greatest offenses are going to have stretches where they look terribly coached. But for me, and I think for a lot of people, you have way too many of these stretches where it's 3 and out, 3 and out, 3 and out, or just no explosive plays, and then you have a game with App State where your only touchdown is late in desperation time. I mean, you score 9 points for most of that game. Like that sort of, to me, I think is like the breaking point for a lot of people, and just puts the exclamation point on this offense.
So everybody wants consistency. Consistency is the key in sports. Consistency is the key to life. It's something that I think everyone strives for in every facet of what they do. When Oklahoma loses to Kansas State and the offensive performance is underwhelming, people are right to get on the message boards and say, what the heck? Or what the hell, damn guy? Why is the offense looking kind of sloppy? But the difference is that's a blip. That is a true aberration. And they are still as close as you can get to consistent in college football in terms of their offensive output. Carolina can't even find itself in the opposite situation. They can't even have the one blip game where the offense looks good. And I think that's the most disturbing part. It's not that they haven't been able to consistently do anything good on offense. It's that they haven't even accidentally been able to do anything good on offense this year.
Yeah, I mean, because we point to the Alabama game and said South Carolina looked pretty good in the Alabama game. True. But they also, in that game, first of all, Alabama is not the dominant defensive team that it once was, maybe a few years ago. That's been evident.
Yeah, your boy Joseph Burrow exposed that this weekend.
The next part of it is, even in that game, when South Carolina did some good things, they got a late touchdown to make it, they scored 23 points.
I think there were literally 9 seconds left.
Yeah, you get a late touchdown, and you also still had inconsistencies in that game, right? Because you go down, for example, going down to the red zone, having a first and goal and coming away with 0 points. That's an example. I mean, the question that we had after the UNC game, question I had at least, was that an aberration or was it a pattern? Now we have the answer. It was a pattern, right? Can we all agree on that? I think so. So it just and it hasn't even been like one different thing with this team. Like some games, you look at Tennessee, they alternate between a touchdown, an explosive touchdown play on the first play of the game, and then not being able to do much of anything later in the game. Then you get, the defense and special teams, which have largely been pretty good this year.
Not great in recent weeks, but
right, in recent weeks.
Of the year, yeah.
Alabama not as much, North Carolina not. Even in North Carolina, they alternated between dominant and awful. It's like, what is that? And then, you look at the Tennessee game. The offense let them down, sure, but it was like 2 bad special teams miscues they haven't had much of the year. You look at App State. The defense gave up 13 points to App State. That's winning football. That's good enough. But they had 2 long kick returns. Okay? That's hadn't been a problem most of the year, but it was in this game. And then the offense couldn't do anything in running the football. Running the football has been really the only thing this offense has consistently done well, and even then, not entirely consistent. So, we know that we know all about the injuries. We know about all of them. There's no doubt in my mind if they were fully healthy, they would have potential to be better, but they're not.
But it doesn't matter.
And it doesn't matter.
Because Carolina's backups are, at worst, the caliber of athlete that are Appalachian State starters.
Exactly. And at the beginning of the year, South Carolina was largely healthy on offense. And so what we saw against North Carolina was not good. But again, was it an aberration or not? Maybe it would have turned out to be more of one if they had remained healthy the whole year. I don't know. It's hard for us to believe that at this point. I don't think so.
Because they were really healthy until the last 2 weeks. And there were a preponderance of miserable offensive performances before that.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. So, yeah, my point overall is no, I don't – there's not really evidence to say, oh, well, if they just had this guy or even all of them, that they would be that much better. Better, probably. But yeah, I mean, what we saw on Saturday was not going to cut the mustard for sure.
You
don't cut mustard.
The situation that got me was coming out of a
quarter break.
Quarter break.
Ugh.
That you had. I want to get it right. It was an illegal substitution.
12 men in the huddle.
12 men in the huddle. Yeah.
Out of a quarter break.
That's and then
that should be an automatic touchdown for the other team. If you were that stupid and incompetent.
Then there was a drive where Carolina had actually that same drive. South Carolina comes out. They go from 2nd and 9 to 2nd and 14. This is from the third quarter to the fourth quarter. This is the beginning of the fourth quarter. They have this substitution infraction. They end up getting a first down on that third down on that sequence on a pass interference. Guy grabs Brian Edwards. Then they get sacked. Then after they got sacked, it was like nobody knew what the heck was going on. I guess because they were anticipating, a second down call that wasn't 2nd and 25 or whatever it was. And it was like people were running around, nobody knew where to go. Then they have to hurry to the line because the play call doesn't get in. And then they got a false start at that point because everybody was having to run around and didn't know where they were going. Then they actually completed a pass for 15 yards on the 3rd and 25 to get it down to like 4th and 10 or 11. And then got sacked on 4th down to end that drive.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, man, that's... And Colin actually had a really good take, a really good article. To me, that drive right there is a microcosm sort of the season. But the final drive, too, how South Carolina has like a few like good, like really good plays, individual efforts. You know, Rico Daddle picks up these 2 great first downs. One of them just, you know, heart and determination to get to the marker. Then on the 4th down, you have this. I mean, as much as, you know, we talk about play calling, and I get it. I had lots of issues. Had a great call on the 4th down completion to Daddle, the second one.
Mm-hmm.
The first one was more just Polinsky and Daddle making a play. The second one was a good call. Then the 4th down that ended up being the final play of the game was a great call for the defense that they had on. It was a double post on one side. That ran all the defenders off. Brian Edwards comes all the way across the field.
It was wide open.
And then not only does the throw get missed, but even if he caught it, the hold would have negated it anyway.
But that's good 4th down calls, because the first 4th down on that drive was that long comeback to Brian Edwards, and you can say that, you know, that's just good execution. But that's a good call. Yeah, no, I think it was a good call, and I think that's what has made this part of the discussion so complicated. And I think we've talked about it pretty much every week for the last 6 weeks. It's like, how many times throughout the entire season can you look at a play, sequence, drive, and say, what the heck is Carolina doing? It's not like when Kurt Roper was there and you're like, these just seem like bad play calls. Brian McClendon seems to be calling mostly the right plays at the right times. At least, I mean, you know, we can always relitigate based on results, but there have been so few moments this year when I say, that was stupid. And, you know, even the greatest play callers in the world are going to have a couple of those moments. So it hasn't been overwhelming. And, I mean, Carolina had kind of established its identity by the midway point of the season where you're going to run the ball, not ask Ryan Helinski to do too much. You know, that makes sense. So it's not even that the team lacked identity. And yet, the offense is still just miserable. And it's all these little things. It's the dumb penalties. And it's the lack of effort. Because, frankly, I think that's what Carolina not being able to run the ball against Appalachian State boils down to more than anything. They just didn't care. They didn't want it. There was no fight. There was no effort. There was no energy. There was no confidence. That's been a common theme. And I feel like that, as much as the X's and O's, and again, like some people want to criticize Brian McClendon, and you're allowed to do that. I don't think that's necessarily the right answer. He has creative play design, too. He runs cool stuff. The first Brian Edwards touchdown pass against Vanderbilt, which I think you did it you do that nice breakdown on Gamecock Central where you go through the plays. Yeah, and that's a really cool play design. You know, you motion Brian Edwards from left to right. You get the defender to go with him. As soon as he hits kind of like midway point of the defense, he runs back. It's like, that's great play design. There was a cool play earlier in this game that Will Helms and I talked about on our Monday Get Cocky podcast where they have DeCarrion Joyner at quarterback. They run the pin and pull, but the action in the backfield is like a toss sweep to Deshaun Fenwick and then basically make that a counter action. And then DeCarrion Joyner picked up like 8 yards or something like that. Like,
it's like a toss read as a counter.
There's good play design. There's generally good play calling. So what the hell? Well, 15 points against Appalachian State? It's not just because of drops, and it's not just because of penalties.
Right. So, I mean, I think Wes and I would agree on this point. I mean, I had some issues with the play calling at times in the run game, right? I mean, we can agree with that. It's hard to say, you know, for me, it's hard to say what, like some people, they didn't run the same play. That's what a lot of people say. If the run game's not working, people always say they're running the same plays over and over. No, they're not. I mean, they went in the first half, they went from gap scheme to zone scheme. In the second half. Nothing worked. So you do have to, as coaches, you do have to find something different. I don't know what it is. Not my job. Yeah. Results-oriented business.
But they tried.
Find a way to do it. They did try. But you do have to find a way to be more productive than that. I saw the drops.
Yeah.
I saw open plays. I saw all that. And I agree with you. There have been, I think that's what's been inconsistent is even I feel like the team's been inconsistent, whether it's drops, penalties, whatever, making plays. I feel like the game planning has also been inconsistent at times. Like I didn't like what they did against North Carolina. I did not. And I think North Carolina's defense coordinator does a really good job, but I didn't like what they did against UNC, and then they didn't play well. Missouri, I mean, that was a tough deal. They couldn't run it. They probably should have tried more.
Yeah, I was going to say, we can't say they couldn't run it. They didn't run it.
They didn't run it. So I think that's, you can go back to play calling on that. But there are other games where, with McClendon as a play caller, that they've done a lot of, point to that Clemson game. I mean, not his fault that Wes and I were playing, on defense that night. I mean,
I had a lot of missed tackles that night.
You did.
Yeah.
You did.
I didn't want to call you out on it, but
that's why I'm sitting here.
And then, some of the stuff they have done, yeah, and there are limitations with what they've had this year. So it is tough. I mean, it's not – everybody does want to make it one thing, and it's really, really not.
The inconsistency has been the issues. And I don't remember if we've talked about this or if I mentioned it on my Get Cocky podcast, but that's what's frustrating about this team. I had this conversation with my roommate just yesterday. If it were just that Carolina didn't have a vertical passing attack, that would be one thing. But some games, Carolina's lack of explosive plays, vertical passing attack is what kills them. Some games, it's Ryan Helinski's inaccuracy. In some games, it's his injury. In some games, it's the offensive line play like it was on Saturday. In some games, it's Carolina wasn't able to run the ball or didn't run the ball. And sometimes it's play calling. It's basically Brian McClendon and company keep finding new and innovative ways to screw this team up offensively. And I make it sound like that's malicious, and obviously I'm being a little bit sarcastic, but I've never seen a team find so many different ways to be unproductive on offense over the course of just one season. Which leads me to, I guess, my next question. What of Brian McClendon and this offensive staff now and going forward?
What of?
What of?
Okay.
I'm just making it vague.
Well, God, and see, I get caught going back into the down the rabbit hole and the details and stuff like that, but I think it's more of a big picture question. You're kind of at the point, guys, of what Muschamp said, results oriented business, and we can talk about all the reasons. And we have to. We've talked about all the reasons a lot. People are probably tired of hearing about all the reasons. But whatever the reasons are, the results have just not been there. And I think Brian McClendon is a very, very sharp, up-and-coming young coach. And most anybody I've ever talked to, even in the industry, agrees with that. Would it have been better off for him maybe to be learning under, if you had brought in, and I don't even know if this was a possibility. There were a lot of rumors when South Carolina hired Brian McClendon that if he didn't get this OC job, he was going to go to Tennessee as co-OC. So I'm not saying that this is even a possibility.
Does that mean Carolina could have had Jim Chaney for that game and drawn up the right game plan to get their playmakers involved?
Possibly, but my point being, as a young coach, I'm sure, and being around Brian McClendon, very confident guy, I'm sure he was confident he was ready to be an SEC offensive coordinator. And you're always going to bet on yourself. But if you brought in Dan Warner as the offensive coordinator, and maybe Dan doesn't even want to be an OC anymore. I've heard that. But let's substitute anybody. You bring in basically your South Carolina version of Chad Morris. Your guy that's been an offensive coordinator, that has called a bunch of plays before, that has a scheme, has a system that works. And Brian McClendon remains your co-OC and learns the ins and outs of play calling and has basically someone to, I don't even say tutor, that sounds too negative, but has someone who basically he's learning under as far as being an OC, not just being a great receivers coach, not just being a great recruiter, but he's learning the ins and outs of, hey, this is how I game plan, this is how I do this is how I do that, and this is my system, this is my answer when teams are doing this is my complementary play to these plays. When they take away this is what I do, this is how I think. As opposed to learning on the job at times, as I believe is the case, then it is a different conversation. Because I don't want anything I say to sound like I don't think Brian McClendon is a smart dude, because he is, and he's a good dude, and he's one of the good guys in coaching from everything I've heard. So I still think Brian McClendon has a great future. I think Brian McClendon is a future head coach and a successful one. But when you're in this league, you're going up. I mean, the defensive coordinators South Carolina has faced this year. I mean, even North Carolina. That
Jay
team,
Bateman's a 2-time Royals finalist.
Yeah, that guy has seen everything you're going to throw at him, and he's going to have an answer. And
he's considered one of the most innovative defensive minds in football right now.
Yeah, so you better have an answer to the answer. And just being an average offensive coordinator in this league maybe makes you a below average offensive coordinator. Like being an average overall offensive coordinator maybe makes you a below average one based on what you're going to face week in, week out. And I just I wonder at times there's a lot of there are some really innovative, cool plays, but does it all fit together?
No.
Does it all complement? Is this a bunch of let's run this cool play here?
Mm-hmm.
Or the really, really good offenses, everything builds off of everything else. There are complementary plays. And then I wonder, does this offense have an answer to pretty much everything? Sometimes you're just going to get got. Sometimes the other guy is going to have your number. But it's happened too often. And I go back to, here's what I go back to. The fact that the offense looks so much better when they're on the scripted portion of the plays.
Yep.
And it's, hey, this is what we're going to do, and we're going to make them stop us.
Mm-hmm.
And those plays, even this past week, they scored 6 points, but they drove the ball better. Other than the desperation time, they drove the ball better in those first 2 drives consistently than they did at any other point in the ball game. That, to me, has been a consistent thing this year. Clemson, last year, they had an outstanding game plan, and Clemson actually never really had an answer for it. So They didn't have to readjust. So to me, the difference between an average OC or a young up-and-coming OC that maybe has a lot of great ideas, and then that guy that's done it before, is that guy that's really done it before, he has, so back in 2015, I was facing Buffalo, and their defensive coordinator made that adjustment. Here's what we're going to do.
Yeah.
Let's do this right now.
It's an experience gap. And that makes sense. But I think to that point, and for Carolina fans that are looking for answers right now, I think those things don't have to be mutually exclusive, where we can sit here and say, Brian McClendon does some things, has a bright future, but isn't the guy right now, because to your point that you made earlier, Chris, it's, in some ways, it's a little bit fortunate that we all got to see what a depleted Carolina offense looks like against a team like Appalachian State. Because I said, those guys, the Trey Adkins, the Chad Terrells, those guys are kind of like App State caliber kinds of guys. Maybe in terms of talent, you could say better, whatever,
or worse,
whatever. But roughly. I mean, Trey Adkins is a walk on. I don't know what Chad Terrell. I don't know how many stars he had, but if you compare that, outside of Brian Edwards, it's no Shi Smith, no Ortre Smith, no Josh Vann, no Nick Muse. It's okay, so you're dealing with generally depleted talent, or at least a more even distribution of talent on the field. It's not like Carolina was overwhelmingly better at the skill positions in that case. Ryan Helinski is still markedly better. Brian Edwards is maybe the best guy on the field on either offense on Saturday. Rico not at 100%. You say it's kind of a wash. So then you get to see a little bit more of, what does it look like when you're coaching talent versus talent. Obviously, Carolina's seen that all year. Saw it against Tennessee, saw it against Missouri, teams that were as talented as Carolina, and just absolutely blew them off the field. And I think that's when some of those coaching foibles get exposed.
Yeah, I can see that. I also think there's a case to be made that as much as we talked about South Carolina's improved depth, the guys at App State, whether right or wrong, the guys at App State their first-string guys were definitely, to me, more talented than South Carolina's second-string guys. And they're all veterans who've played. And they're all. I mean, this was a team of, what did they say, 18 seniors in the starting 22 or something like that. So,
yeah, I mean, their quarterback's
juniors and seniors.
Possible NFL guy.
Yeah,
He didn't look great. So, yeah, well, I mean, you shake your head, but credit to South Carolina's defense played pretty well.
Which has been good. I Will and I talked about this a little bit on Monday, too. It's so unfortunate because this is not even close. Will Muschamp's best defense here at South Carolina. The defensive line, I feel so bad for them because this is such a good defensive. Like, maybe you have to go back to 2012 to find the defensive line this good. And a great performance by that unit all season long is going to be lost to the sands of a miserable 4-8 season.
Yeah, and I don't know. I think most certainly if we're talking about FCS teams, which App State is not anymore, we're talking about FCS team. Yeah, I think you can compare their starters to South Carolina's backups. I think we're shortchanging the App State players. If we're comparing like offense to offense, their receivers.
You don't think Chad Terrell would be starting for App State?
No,
I don't think so. Would Trey Atkins be starting for them? No,
well, I mean he's a walk.
So, those were good seasoned college football players for App State. I'm not excusing any of it. I just, if we're going into that detail, I don't think that. I think App State's second string guys or App State's first string guys across the board offensively are probably better than South Carolina's second string guys offensively.
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, Corey Sutton, he was a guy I really liked in high school. I remember we saw him in camp. He's a K-State transfer. K-State's pretty good.
Yeah, but again, we're getting...
Yeah, I mean, we're getting way down there. But
I'm not trying to get down the rabbit hole.
This is a game, again, this is not... People are going to say, well, you're excusing them. No. If South Carolina was like... What game was this? This is the 10th game. If South Carolina was 7-2 going into the game, people would have been sitting here worried about App State, right?
Yeah,
it's even more worrisome that they're a good
They
team.
were only a 6.5 point favorite. The line opened at like 3.5. It should have stayed there. It should have been App State. I guess -5 apparently.
So, for me, to go back to a little bit more of a general point about like the future and everything, we've all, like Wes said, we've taught almost ad nauseum probably about the reasons for everything. So, of course, everybody's got to get through these last two games to see what happens, and that'll sort of write the story in some ways. And by what happens, I don't mean South Carolina's not going to be favored in either game, obviously. But
are they going to lose the games by less than a combined 40 points?
So that's the question, right? And we'll get into that more in the next couple of weeks. But like those are the questions. So if there's an opportunity on the table, to do a really deep dive into the program and figure out what needs to change, even internally, if you know all these things, yes, there have been injuries. Yes, you lost your senior quarterback. You lost Kill Pollard. Yes, it's an inconsistent team. Yes, you haven't had, you've had a few recruiting cycles, et cetera. All those things are in play. You've had a lot of drop passes, but you still got to look at the offense and figure out, okay, how is it going to get fixed? So if you're Will Muschamp, you look at it, and even if whatever you may believe about the offense, there's still some things you're going to have to do, right? Am I being fair on that? Like, you've got to figure out a way of what are we going to change. The offseason program, the belief may be that the offseason program and the way South Carolina trains is perfect. That may be the belief in the building, but you got to look at it, right? And not just because of the perception, but there comes a time where you got to look at it and say, are we going to have to shake things up defensively, special teams? I mean, everything about the program, I think when you get to this point, you have to do a lot of self-reflection. I mean, Will Muschamp talked about looking in the mirror a lot after the game during his Tuesday press conference. And so in doing that, and he says he evaluates the program every year. I'm sure he will. But this is going to be, I think, probably the deepest dive that's going to be taken just because of where things are, and depending on how the rest of the year goes.
Well, we have a couple more weeks to decide, obviously exactly how that goes. We've gone a little bit long here. I have one more question for you, so let's do this as a speed round before we get into a little buy or sell. And this may be easy for you all to answer anyway. Is this the worst loss for Will Muschamp at South Carolina?
Yeah.
Man, that is a tough question. That's hard to do.
My top three is this Appalachian State game, last year's Florida game, and this year's Tennessee game. And those other two have more to do with performance. And I think you can make a probably pretty convincing argument that App State's better than Better than Tennessee.
I'm picking last year's Virginia game.
I was going to say that
yeah.
one. That one stands out to me. The North Carolina game this year.
That was really bad. I think the Virginia game has really been a springboard. You know, not necessarily for how the team performs, but just taking everything back to that. This team hadn't been right since the Virginia game. There's some probably
been right
some
since the
truth in
Akron
that.
game. Let's blame Akron.
Yeah,
Let's blame
right.
that stupid Marshall game for getting canceled. Let's blame the Hurricane.
That's all of it.
Yeah.
But I think the Virginia game, because they performed, that was probably the worst performance, right, of all of them. They scored 0 points. Looked awful the entire game.
Yeah, I mean, they might as well have scored 0 against Appalachian State.
I know, but still. And I know App State was at home. I know it's a Sun Belt team.
Yeah, and it's a more meaningful game than a meaningless bowl game.
A few weeks ago, talking to some people that I sort of trust about personnel and things like that, and where South Carolina was at, which is not where they wanted to be, but sort of going over that stretch of, what was the stretch? Tennessee, App State, who else was in here recently? Tennessee, App State, Vanderbilt. That 3-game stretch.
Mm-hmm.
And the opinion was App State's the best of all those, right?
Yeah.
So now you could the way Tennessee is playing now, as opposed to not early season Tennessee, they were awful. Tennessee now, you know, I think you can make the case Tennessee's playing better. But anyway, the point is, App State was thought of, and is thought of as a good team.
Mm-hmm.
That Virginia team last year, yeah, pretty good too. But I don't know, man. I'd probably still go Virginia.
Yeah.
Just my opinion.
All right.
Yeah.
Wes, did you give a final answer on that?
Yeah, I said App State, but
Yeah.
I mean Virginia. To me, Virginia and then North Carolina are second and third, just
Those would be,
because the Virginia
Not
game.
the Florida game from last year.
No,
I think honestly you could almost pinpoint that as like, that is a game where the team seemed, we're so far down the rabbit hole, where the things that have bothered me the most about this Carolina team this year aren't the play calling, aren't the penalties, aren't the whatever, the this, the that. The amount of times that the team has shown up just looking lethargic and apathetic, no energy, no confidence. You could say that about the North Carolina game. You could say it about the Missouri game. You could say it about that last little bit of the Florida game. You can say it about the second half of the Tennessee game. You can say it about just about the entire Vanderbilt game. You can say that's 6 of 10 games where this team didn't look ready to come in. I feel like that started in that second half against Florida. It was just like, oh, well, I know we're up by 70, but we're going to lose this game or whatever.
no. See, I just felt like, I wouldn't say the team has looked. In my opinion, I don't think they've looked lethargic in all those games. I just think they haven't played well. And to me,
you
there's
think they
a
look lethargic on
difference.
Saturday?
I mean, maybe at times. I wouldn't say they look lethargic in 6 games this year. I think they just haven't.
Well, definitely
well.
App State. The North Carolina game, nobody wanted to be there, especially the fans, and definitely not the team. Missouri.
I don't think you can say the
You don't
team didn't want to be there. I mean, these guys work their tails off.
No, I know they do, but
for all like,
we don't need to protect the kids. You can tell. You can tell when someone goes out there and I'm not saying they're mailing it in. I'm not saying they're trying to lose. Huh?
You think they're going through the motions in the season opener?
It feels like it. It felt like it.
Yeah,
you don't think so?
No, I don't buy that. They didn't play well, and you could say they didn't coach well. They didn't play well, etc.
Well, then they're lacking confidence. If not energy, then confidence. And I'm not saying
I don't
that
even know if that's it.
I mean,
so you thought that team looked like they were firing on all cylinders?
No,
they didn't play well. You can't play poorly and fire on all cylinders.
But you can play poorly and play energetic. Carolina didn't play well offensively against Georgia, but damn, it looked like they were leaving it out there on the line. Against that Appalachian State game, they were just getting beat to the spot time and again. Same against North Carolina. I don't know.
But you're talking about the entire team, and earlier we were talking about how well the defense played against App State. So I don't think you can say. I mean, was Rico Dowdle lethargic when he was literally laying everything he had to get the final yard to get a first down on?
You know why that play stood out so much? Because how many other times did you see that happen on Saturday?
Yeah, I'm not. That would be a good buy or sell. Was the team lethargic? Sell. All right, let's move on.
Wow. Doesn't mean they're bad people. It doesn't mean they're bad players.
No, we didn't say
that. I'm not protecting
Y'all
them.
have both played sports.
I'm just saying.
Y'all have both been in sporting events where you wanted to win, but you just weren't, for whatever reason. Maybe your girlfriend broke up with you that day. Maybe you were hungover. Like, whatever.
I just think we're speaking in very, very, speaking in generalities about the entire team for 6 games when we don't really have the knowledge. Like we don't know that. Like
we've seen the team early against Alabama, defensively and offensively, even at times against Georgia. The first 3 quarters of Florida. I mean, this team has looked confident and like they belong. And
when you make plays, you're naturally going to be sort of fired up for those plays.
But I would argue that you make plays when you are fired up.
You make plays when you execute.
I mean, the team missed 2001 one game this year.
That wasn't on the team, dude. They're told when to come out.
No, but I was like, that is a bad omen.
They're told
that
when
was the
to come
Florida game,
out.
wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. I was like, that is not a good sign. I don't know.
All right. Wow.
I think
Wow.
the coaching staff
way off.
I think the coaching staff has this team playing tight.
Yeah, okay, you could say that.
That's
you
all
could
I'm
say
saying.
they play
Tight,
tight.
but tight is not.
That's not. They don't care. They're lethargic.
It's okay. It looks the same. Whether you're tight, whether you're lacking confidence, whether you're lacking energy, whatever the case is, the end result is less than desirable.
Your best
play
argument is that they have played tight at times,
Yeah.
and I would go with you on that 100%.
We're on that.
God,
But-
y'all with the semantics. I'm normally the
That's-
semantics guy.
That's not even semantics. That's a completely different thing. Anyway,
Tight,
all right,
energy, whatever.
We got to move.
So, buy or sell? Sponsored by
I got somewhere to be.
Bishop Real Estate Group. 665-1442. Terry Bishop, former Gamecock quarterback. Big supporter of the program. 36 years of real estate experience. Facebook.com/the Terry Bishop team. And we appreciate him sponsoring our football content on GamecockCentral.com as well as our weekly buy or sell feature, which Pearson does a wonderful job coming up with his questions.
Thanks.
And
Let's hear 'em.
also-
Y'all gonna hate my first one.
Also, real quick, I do want to thank, because we're running out of time, I want to thank Slotsky's Deli for being a sponsor on the podcast as well, and for sponsoring our Slotsky's Pick'em contest each week, where you can win a free tailgating package from Slotsky's Deli. And those guys have been great to us for, 3 or 4 years now. And great food, very, very convenient. If you win the package, I send you a gift card, and you pick it up on the way to Williams-Brice Stadium. So thanks to Slotsky's Deli.
I went there on Sunday and got the sandwich that I always talk about is the Tuscan, I think is what it's called. And then the one that I got this time was some kind of chicken sandwich with like a Chipotle mayonnaise. I don't remember the name of it. I'm bad with the names. For some
I got
reason.
the
They're really
beef smoke McCheesy
good. Oh, my roommate got that.
or whatever.
Yeah.
Absolutely delicious.
Yeah,
Yep.
it looked awesome. All right, so a little buy or sell. As Carolina heads to College Station, their farthest road trip of the year. Buy or sell. Will the University of South Carolina football team even go to the game on Saturday? Since they have not for several games this year. And it's really far. I actually wrote that down, but that wasn't a real one. I actually have 4 other ones.
Oh, 4 today. Okay.
Yeah. Well, no, we're going to do 3, and then I'll do a bonus one.
All right, let's go.
You want the first real one? Do you want to
Yeah.
answer that?
No.
Wes just threw his hands up. Y'all didn't have the benefit of seeing
That
it.
was
Y'all are
Wes's
so
answer.
exasperated. God, y'all are dramatic. All right, Joseph Charlton will average more yards per punt on Saturday than Braden Mann. Right now, on the season, Joseph Charlton is averaging 48.3 yards per punt, and Braden Mann is averaging an even 49 yards per punt. Joseph Charlton will probably have to punt a few more times. He's actually got 1,000 total punt yards on the season compared to Mann just because he's punted more. But if Joseph Charlton wants to dethrone the reigning Ray Guy Award winner, claim that trophy for himself this year, got to win the head-to-head matchup with the man himself.
I'm buying. I just complete homer pick, man. I mean, Joseph Charlton. He spoke to the media yesterday. He's got the no shave November going on, the great hair.
Yeah.
I can't go against the hometown guy. I'm actually going to AC Flora here in a second for their basketball player signing. So
An omen.
yeah, I'm going hometown pick all the way, man. And frankly, he'll probably be backed up punting more than A&M may be punting to pin the ball deep more. So the numbers.
Okay. You just changed my mind. I'm with you on that.
You're
Bye.
Bye.
We're all going to buy it. I love it. Seriously, I like
Bye.
the head-to-head matchup. This is the freaking Ali Frazier of great punters. Joseph Charlton has just been... No, we don't talk about him enough because
It's the
he's
most
a punter.
consistent player on the team.
More than Javon Kinlaw and more than Brian Edwards. He's on the short list for sure. He's been excellent. It's going to be really sad when he's gone because he's tremendous. So I'm going to buy, like you're saying, just because why the hell not? Let's buy it. That's awesome. Next up, Kellen Mond will rush for 50 yards or fewer on Saturday. Carolina's done an excellent job containing dual-threat quarterbacks, including Zach Thomas, who was statistically the most mobile guy they had faced all year, and he did all of nothing with his legs against Carolina on Saturday. How will they fare against Kellen Mond?
Do you have his numbers in front of you?
He has 83 carries for 353 yards on the season, and if you factor out sack yardage, that is 63 carries for 467 yards.
Okay. Just gut feeling, I'm selling it, so I think he goes over.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with Wes. I'll sell also.
Wow. I'm going to say that I said this Carolina defensive line in particular, but the Carolina defense has been good this year, and statistically they've been really good against mobile quarterbacks. As I mentioned, the only guy that's really gotten them is Kelly Bryant. He's not really a true dual-threat quarterback. He's more of a running quarterback. I think they're going to continue the trend. I think they're going to hold Kellen Mond to fewer than 50 rushing yards, and since we're just talking about rushing yards, that's going to include sack yardage, and Carolina's done a pretty good job of getting after the quarterback. And that Texas A&M offensive line is pretty porous and has made Mond run for his life probably more times than he would like. So I'm going to buy that.
Yeah. Logically, I probably agree with you. I don't know. I just got a gut feeling. Yeah, fine. I got a gut feeling he may break a long one, and it may be the big portion of that. Yeah, I don't know.
Okay. All right. So you're saying it'll be close?
There you go.
All right. This is related.
That's my move.
South Carolina this Saturday will outrush Texas A&M. You want these numbers? This is awesome.
Mm-hmm.
So Carolina has rushed for 1,682 yards this season. That's 4.8 yards per carry. I don't remember how many carries, but do the math. For 18 rushing touchdowns. Texas A&M has rushed for 1,431 yards on fewer carries for an average of, wait for it, 4.8 yards per carry and 19 touchdowns. How similar really are these teams? Like, those numbers are obviously identical in terms of yards per carry, touchdowns one off. Let's factor out sack yardage. Ryan Helinski, 115 sack yards this season. Kellen Mond, 114 sack yards this season.
Nice.
I mean, unbelievable how similar these teams are in terms of their running productivity. So, buy or sell, Carolina will outrush Texas A&M on Saturday.
Yeah, but how many has South Carolina rushed for if you take out their running against that vaunted App State defense?
Well, factor out just 21 yards on 27 carries.
But it's crazy how much that game negatively affects. You would think, oh, well, let's take out that game because it's against a non-Power 5, but
it was because it wasn't even normal bad. It was like, whoa.
Yeah, it's like, what?
When was the last time Carolina had 21 rushing yards? Did y'all fact check that? Has that happened ever?
Oh, that's a good question.
Like
sure.
I would say like 1970, but they didn't.
Well, how many
have
did they
the
have
forward
against
pass
Missouri?
So.
I think it was similar to
like
that,
-1 or something.
I'm looking right now, and I'll tell you.
It was.
Oh shit!
It was that. I mean, it was
16.
I thought I saw 16 earlier.
Yeah, it was low.
Yeah.
All right, here we go. Carolina stopped the run against A&M last year pretty well, even when they had struggled to stop the run against other teams.
And that was with the top rusher in the SEC.
Yeah,
now, they didn't. I think
had
Travion Williams
stud.
didn't get to double-digit carries until the fourth quarter, which I remember being a big kind of factor in that game. They just didn't run him much.
Missing their starting running back from the beginning of the year. Still have talent.
Yeah.
Isaiah
Carolina,
Spiller, the freshman.
Tavian Feaster will not play this week.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
Is Rico healthy?
If A&M is 10 points better, then do they have the lead? Are they running the football or South Carolina's having to throw the football? I'm saying A&M outrushes South Carolina. I don't know. What's the verbiage?
Sell.
Okay, I
Yep.
sell.
I'm on that. I'm selling all the way on that.
I'm selling too. Dadgummit. Yeah, for all the reasons that you mentioned, not the least of which is they will have a lead. By the way, last week, what did we do last week? Nope, I didn't write it down. Sorry. Bonus. Carolina will give up 3 sacks. Exactly 3 sacks
every week.
Push.
No. Yeah, so you buy Carolina will have exactly 3 sacks.
Oh, I'll sell then.
You know their sack totals for this year, right? Given up.
Tell us every week. It's like 3, 3, 3.
3
It's
3-0,
3-0, 3-4, 3-0,
3-3,
3-3, and then it was 3 against Appalachian State.
Was it? Okay.
It was 0 against Vanderbilt and 3 against Appalachian State.
So I'll sell. I assume Wes thinks you're going to give up more than 3.
Either way.
You don't know.
It's only happened once this year against Missouri.
You're going to leave that to the imagination.
All right. Well, that'll do it for us here. Wes is already packing up before I finish talking. Very rude. Also, I'm really sorry. We were supposed to post a thread for questions, and we did not. But we went long on
You
this
did
anyway.
not.
Well, okay. Chris initially said he would. I asked if I should, and then I had a crisis yesterday. Not a real crisis, but something that distracted me. But, Chris, you did say you were going to do that, and then you did not do that. Somebody asked you on your Ask Chris.
Oh, yeah, and I
Yeah.
didn't. But then you volunteered, and then, so we didn't do
So
it.
sorry about that. We'll try to remember next week.
Next time.
I don't know.
We'll
We
do it.
suck at that, so maybe we won't. Rate, review, subscribe. Thank you all so much for listening. We'll talk to you again next week.